This video clip should give you a clear idea of how do we take our CAPS policy document and from there make sure that we present an effective lesson to our learners. We're going to look at all the stages in between and how do we get from that policy document to the actual lesson. Now, to ensure a successful year of teaching, all teachers should be involved in the planning and preparation for the upcoming year. Planning can be broken down into a number of different levels, and teachers should begin by planning in the macro sense and then moving towards the micro and individualized planning. So we start with the curriculum policy, the CAPS document that's provided to you for every subject and every grade. From there, teachers need to create their own annual teaching plan, and in some policy documents they do provide you with guidelines. Now the next stage, the lesson plan, is probably your most important aspect. And then of course your implementation and reflection of the lesson to see how you could improve. Now let's start by having a look at the policy document. Now the example here is history, but this goes for all the policy documents in every grade and every subject. There's a whole list of information that the policy document provides to you for planning to enable you to plan successfully and to teach your lessons. I'm going to go through each of these individually fairly quickly, but just know that they are in your policy document that you can look at for your individual subject and grade. The first is time allocation. Every policy document tells you how much time or hours you should be spending per week on each subject. In each policy document, there are the aims of the subjects. This gives you the overall aims, as well as in some cases, the specific aims. More importantly, the specific skills that should be taught in this subject. In this example, here you're looking at the specific skills and aims that's mixed here that should be taught in history. And by the end of the year, you need to make sure that you've actually taught these skills to the learners. So these should be included in a lot of your subjects. Then importantly, content areas. This also gives you a nice overview of what should be taught throughout the year. It's important to see that different areas or content areas have different weighting in the subjects. So sometimes they give you more specific time allocations of the actual weightings, or in the second example here, they just give you the percentage of time you should be spending on each content area. Recommended resources is a good list to look at because before you teach, you need to know that you have access to the resources that you might need. In some cases, they provide additional resources. These are the nice to haves. So that's where they might say a TV or DVD or a computer or some certain programs that you might be able to use. These are not essential, they are additional resources. You are also given the teaching time for each content area. So per topic, per term is broken down into how many hours you should be spending on each of these. This also provides quite a nice guideline for assessments, knowing how much focus to put in the exams and tests on each content area. There's also a phase overview of the subject, so you get an overall glance at what will the learners be learning in the phase. So if you teach in grade 8, you can have a look and see what have they done in grade 7 and what will they be doing next year in grade 9. There's also a grade overview per term, so you get the content and concepts for the entire term and what's going to be taught there. This is also quite nice as a checklist because you can go back and check, have you covered everything for the term? In each CAPS document, there should be some form of content clarification and teaching guidelines. Some content is more clarified than others. So for example, in this example is maths. You've got numbers, operations, and relationships, and it really goes into detail as to exactly what concepts and skills should be taught and ideas of how to actually teach the subject. Now, not all subjects give you that. Then you've also got a program of formal assessment. Every CAPS policy document has one of these, and this will tell you how many formal assessments should be done per term and what the formal assessments should be. It also provides the weighting in some cases, and sometimes it actually provides you the actual mark allocation for each assignment. This doesn't happen in each subject though, so if there's no mark allocation provided, then you need to use your own discretion. And then most importantly, every subject provides the cognitive levels for assessment. These are the different levels of thinking that we'd like our learners to achieve in tests and exams, and in fact in our teaching as well. So take careful note of that because that will show you the different levels of thinking that the learners actually have to be able to do. Although the CAPS documents provide content and skills that need to be taught, it is also important to contextualize the information. Consider the type of school and the type of learners in class and link the information in the context that they will be familiar with. Your annual teaching plan should make allowances for learners who need extra support, as well as extension activities to push and extend other learners. It's important to meet the needs of all the learners in your class. For this reason, this should be a working document. You should take the example that's in the CAPS document and make changes to it to be able to contextualize it and personalize it for your classroom. Lesson plans are about the planning process that a teacher goes through to plan the lesson. There are many considerations that need to be addressed in order to plan an interactive and effective lesson. The lesson plan is not necessarily about the piece of paper, it's about the process that you've gone through to plan the lesson. So what do we consider when planning a lesson? Well, the first is the context of the teaching environment is very important. Even if the teacher has prepared a fantastic interactive lesson, learning still may not take place effectively. The learner should be switched on mentally and display psychological attention to the lesson for effective learning to take place. You want their full attention at all times. If you look at the interactive environment, one of the most effective teaching tips is to include the learners in the learning process. The theory of learn by doing, where you're teaching the learners skills, not just the knowledge. This is so important. Learners learn best through practice. Practical sessions should not be lengthy or content-driven, but rather shorter and more often. The best way to get learners to remember or understand something is to practice it and do it often. Then let's look at your structured approach, how you structure your approach. Learners' attention span is limited, and their capacity to retain information is limited as well. Therefore, be selective in the information that you choose for each lesson. Make sure you pay attention to your ordering of the lessons, and make sure there's a logical sequence. Remember, learners will remember and recall the information you teach in the order that you actually teach it. And then the most important is less is more. It is important that teachers don't transfer their own stress about completing the curriculum to their teaching. Often when teachers are under pressure, they resort to chalk and talk style teaching, which is the least effective form of teaching. Learners don't respond to this well. And to content-dense lessons, they don't actually end up retaining much information. Make sure you touch on the most important content and rather drive the skills behind it. And then I think what every teacher wonders about is what should their lesson plan include? And a lesson plan should be useful and practical for the teacher using it. It must therefore be structured in a logical way for that particular teacher. The look of the lesson plan is really not important. It's about what is included. So the first and most important thing is the purpose of the lesson. The aim, goals, or objectives outline the purpose of the lesson and what you want to achieve. This is taken from the actual curriculum and should include knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes. This will guide you during the lesson as to say, what do I actually want to achieve in this lesson? The next, which is really important, is the teaching methods. The structure of the lesson and how the lesson is actually going to be taught is the most important part of the lesson. This should include how you are going to plan to teach the knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes, and should be written in such a way that anyone else could pick up the lesson plan and see how to teach it. It also forms as a checklist to make sure that you're doing practical activities all the time, rather than just standing up and chalk and talking. Then, of course, we need to record how we're going to assess. Teachers need to either do an informal or formal assessment method during teaching and learning to make sure the lesson was actually effective. This may be in the form of homework, a couple of questions asked, a quiz, or any other method that may help the teacher to determine whether the learners actually understood the content and, more importantly, can carry out the skills that were taught. Now, differentiation in every class. There's going to be a couple of learners that grasp the concepts and skills quicker than others. These learners need to be kept busy so they don't disturb the others and become a behavioral problem. And you, of course, don't want them to lose interest and become bored. These extension activities or processes need to be determined before the time. Similarly, learners that take longer to grasp the concept or acquire the skills of the lesson may need some additional support. Now, this gets easier as the year goes on because you get to know your learners and you'll see which ones will need support activities or which ones need extension activities. And then probably the most important, and this is the section that most teachers forget. After a lesson, there should always be reflection. This allows teachers to make notes on what did work and what didn't work, and how it could possibly be changed, and so that you don't make the same mistakes when repeating the lesson or a similar lesson. This should just be a couple of rough notes rather than a long time consuming your thoughts and ideas. This lesson plan template is really just an example. What's important here are these 5 aspects that should be at least thought about before every lesson is taught. Hopefully this gives you a better idea of how do we take the content that is given to us in the curriculum and CAPS document, and how do we translate that into an effective lesson.